name is John Morgan, and I'm going to be your virtual tour guide. I manage IT here at Bob's, but also I do tours. So, I thought a great place to start would be here in our soil production facility. You see, we don't use what you would consider dirt like you would dig up out of a garden. We use what's called a soilless growing media. And we actually get the raw materials for it and produce it ourselves. So we get something like what you would get from a garden center if you bought potting mix, but we're able to finely control the recipe to get the exact potting mix that we want for what we're growing. So let me show you how we do that. The first ingredient in our growing mix is peat moss. And peat moss is harvested from peat bogs in Canada, and we get it in these giant bales, and each one of these bales weighs 1 ton. Alright, this is inside of one of our bale busters, and basically we load those bales of peat moss, or in this case seed starting mix, into the bale buster. It gets lifted up from the bottom up toward the top, and up at the top there you can see the teeth that kind of scrape off the top of the bale over into a hopper. Running underneath of the soil system is a belt that all of the ingredients drop onto one item at a time, and it kind of creates a layer cake as the ingredients run down through the soil system. Then down on this end, it runs through these 2 shrouds right here that basically have rototiller tines in them that mix up the soil before it heads up the belt and over into the production building. In these smaller hoppers we have ingredients like lime that we add to help adjust the pH of the soil. Leaving the dirt room, the soil travels along the ceiling on this conveyor belt over into our production building. And from there it gets dropped onto another belt where it travels across and gets diverted into hoppers for the different types of flat fillers that we have. For example, it can drop into one of our smaller flat fillers for filling seedling plug trays. Alright, so we have our seed starting mix. The next thing is the seedling plug trays go through the flat filler and get filled with soil, and then that's where seed meets soil. So let's go find some seed. This is our seed storage cooler, and right now it is a balmy 46 degrees in here. We keep the seed stored at a low temperature, and that is to slow down its metabolism and increase its shelf life. Because seed, after all, is a living organism. It might not look like it, but it is, and seed does have a shelf life where eventually the germination rate will start to drop off. And at any given time, we have a couple $1 million worth of seed stored in here. We literally have everything from A to Z, from Abutulon to zinnias, and it's all organized alphabetically. So when it comes to our wholesale seedlings, we are an exclusive grower for a company called Ball Seed. Basically what we're doing is filling orders placed through Ball Seed and then shipping them out to other greenhouses and garden centers. So this packet that I have, it's from Ball Seed. It's for Broccoli Destiny. And it actually has a barcode on it that we use to track it during the production process. That way we can track this packet and also keep track of how much seed we've used. Because we constantly have orders coming in and orders shipping out, we have to keep a running inventory of our seed. And this particular packet is 5,000 broccoli seeds. Alright, so the next step is sowing the seeds. And the first thing that happens is the plug trays go through this roller. It's called a dibbler, and it just makes a little indentation in the tray. And then as the tray goes on through, it runs underneath of this roller. And this little roller has holes that are drilled into it, and there's a vacuum being pulled on it. So it's sucking seeds up against it, and then as the trays go underneath, the vacuum gets cut off at the bottom, and the seeds drop in one row at a time. And then moving on down the line, the trays go through and get a covering. After being sown, some of the plug trays make their way into this room. This is our germination chamber. So some of the trays end up on racks like this where they get covered with plastic to germinate. Other types of seed are less picky, so we just kind of stack them up on a cart and shrink wrap the cart and let them germinate that way. But really it doesn't matter because they're just in here long enough for that seed to crack open, and really they leave here before a plant even emerges. And for some of our seedlings, the greenhouse environment is just fine for them to germinate in, so we bypass the germination chamber entirely. And this is where it really comes down to the species that's being sown. So the plug trays eventually make it here to the greenhouse, and this is where they get their start, and it'll be their home for the next 4 to 8 weeks depending on the crop time. And this greenhouse, it happens to be our largest greenhouse here at Bob's. Right now I'm standing in bay 22, and there's 24 bays in this greenhouse. Each walkway right here is referred to as a bay, and each bay in this greenhouse is 630 feet long. So you can think of it as 2 football fields end to end with a 30-foot walkway in the middle. So you might be asking yourself, how in the world do you keep track of where stuff's at in 25 acres of greenhouses? Well, for starters, we label everything. Right now, I'm in bay 22 north in the blue section. And the next part of the puzzle is actually labeling the trays themselves. So each tray gets its own barcode label. You see, we've sold these trays even before we've sown them. They already have somebody that's purchased them, and they're expecting to get their trays of Pansy Matrix Yellow. So there's quite a bit of information here on this tray, but whenever we scan it here in the greenhouse, we'll put a location with that barcode, and then we know, for example, that it's in bay 22 north blue. And also on this tray, it has a 05 right here, and that is the ship week. So this is shipping out in week 5, and that'll happen to be right around February 1st. And it was sown in week 52 of last year. And well, this tray, it hasn't been through a process that we call patching. And you can see that there's a few plugs that are missing. And like I said, we guarantee the customer a full tray. So what we do is we go through a process to fix any missing plugs. And well, let's take a look at that. We guarantee the customers a full tray of seedlings. So this machine, it'll scan each tray and identify the missing plugs. Those are the blue dots that you can see up there on the screen. And then they'll pull good plugs from a donor tray and patch into the tray that's being filled. So here we can see the machine pulling from the donor tray on this side and then patching into the tray on the opposite side. In the bottom of each plug in the tray, there's a hole. So that's how we get rid of the dirt where there's missing plants, is with a little puff of air up through that hole. We saw some items being patched by the CombiFix machine. So what if you have something like these begonias where the leaves overlap the cells in the tray? So the little needles that go down to pick up the plugs would pierce right through the leaves. That's where hand patching comes in. And we have a whole crew of people that go in and patch trays like begonias and other items that aren't well suited to go through the robots. They go in and do them by hand. And of course, it is a huge task. During our peak growing season, we'll produce about 40,000 plug trays per week. 40,000 plug trays in a week, that's quite a bit. And whenever you look at the individual plugs per tray, it's either 144 or 288 or 512 plugs, all crammed into the space the size of a plug tray. So another question you might be asking yourself is, how many plugs does that equal per year? And for us here at Bob's, we produce around 150 million seedling plugs per year. In fact, that ranks us in the top 10 young plant producers in the US. All right, so we've seen plugs at different stages of growth, but really it is the greenhouse and the growers that are responsible for that growth. And here in West Virginia, it gets pretty cold this time of year. Right now, it's about 35 degrees outside. So in the greenhouse, we have a number of ways that we control the environment. First of all is the ceiling itself. This, of course, allows sunlight in, and we're able to capture that heat and help provide warmth for the plants. Also, in this particular greenhouse, the floor is heated. So along the back wall here, we have pipes that go down into the concrete that pump warm water through the floor from a boiler. Also in the greenhouse, controlling the amount of moisture, both the humidity in the air and the moisture in the soil is important. So we use things like these watering booms to help control the moisture. And as you can see, we can program them to kick on and off automatically, and they just sort of run themselves. There's also sensors all over the greenhouse, like this probe that's measuring soil temperature. And we also have sensors that's measuring things like air temperature and also the VPD, the vapor pressure deficit. And that's kind of a fancy term for humidity, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. So all of the sensors out in the greenhouse feed back to a computer back here in the boiler room that is basically controlling the entire greenhouse. And here you can see some of the temperature readings from different sensors in the greenhouse. And here we have the natural gas boilers that are warming up water to pump it through the floor to heat the greenhouse. It's much more efficient to heat up a big concrete slab and let it slowly radiate the heat into the greenhouse than using forced air heaters just to heat up the air. And then overhead we have a maze of pipes and pumps and valves that are carrying the water out to the greenhouse. When it comes to irrigation, we also use concentrated fertilizer that we pump into the irrigation water to fertilize as we water. Things like supplemental lighting and the ridge vents are also controlled by the computer system. And with all the people and technology that you've seen today, and the crazy numbers like 150 million seedlings per year, at the end of the day, right here's our finished product. This is one individual seedling plug. And once these get ready to ship, that's not the end of their journey. They get loaded onto semis. We have our own fleet of trucks, and they get shipped all over the East Coast and as far south and west as Texas. And once they arrive at either an independent garden center or another wholesale greenhouse, they'll get transplanted and grown into a finished product like you can find at a garden center. For this and other great information, visit us online at bobsmarket.com.